Hello there folks, welcome back to my YouTube channel, a place where I discuss different topics like spirituality, deeper introspection, dream interpretation, and well, several other topics like game design. If you're a game designer or game developer and well, working towards your video game, I'm still welcoming, requests for people who want, to hear my constructive criticism and well, get a bit of hold of how I break things down to the minutest of details. Of course, I'm not guaranteeing that I will be doing the best work possible, but at least I am still willing to try. So the video of today will tackle a very, I could say, explosive nature of a term, which is called racism. Now, many people, especially nowadays, might believe that racism means white hates black, black hates white, because racism and is English language is a language that I personally didn't find hard to learn. Yes, my mother is an English teacher, so probably that's one point. But when I also learned German and well, my home language, Romanian, Romanian is a bit more difficult because you have, let's say, genders for the nouns, okay, which English seems to be lacking, okay. You just have a car, okay. That's the only thing. But in German and Romanian, you have the masculine, feminine, and neutral, okay, which makes it a bit more challenging, okay. Now, English is very simple in a way to learn, to a certain extent, yes, but its words can be a bit tricky. And what people may not know is that English is also an occult language. Not that it has anything to do with this video, but many people might say that racism is related to race, as in, the white race, the black race, and, well, yellow skin. Um, well, what I heard as a very fun story is that in 1975, I guess, the concept of race that we know today was created then, okay, 1975 by someone, I think Blumenbach or something like that. A concept of race, was created. Now, even if this may be true, okay, I just heard this, I never documented myself on this, but even if this were true, okay, the point of racism is not a fact of race, okay, because if indeed the concept of white race and black race and this was created in 1975, and yes, many might go further and say it was created to divide us humans even more, well, I would say to a certain extent and from a spiritual standpoint, it was created to pinpoint that indeed there are some physiological differences in between us, but uh, this shouldn't be much of a problem, okay. The fact that there are differences in how, for example, white skinned people and black skinned people would handle their emotions, would handle their mental capacity, this would be again something minimalist. It would be somewhat important, though I doubt there'd be any difference, but this would again be minimalist because there are a lot of white people and there are a lot of black skinned people, so you can't say that if we take these into account, right? Being so many individuals, there will always be, let's say, better white people at certain things and better black people at certain things, okay? Just like with both genders. Now, what people may not understand about racism is that racism does not concern the idea of race, okay? Because if this concept of race, okay, was indeed invented in 1975, okay, there was a lot of hatred against black-skinned people even hundreds of years before, right? And this is not something that's, belonging to the previous millennium. This has always existed, okay? Because it's always an aspect of power, okay? If someone is given sufficient power in a society, okay, you have to understand that people throughout time haven't been taught how to handle their emotions and their mind. These two aspects being of paramount importance to human development, right? Such people end up creating trauma, right? what I call it like drama, okay? Traumas and drama, right? So creating these, obviously their children will grow up as little monsters, okay? Those children unfortunately will end up believing that whatever they were taught is the way to go, so they will, uh, you know, perpetrate, or, well, I don't know if that's perpetuate, or they will carry on, okay, with their parents' deeds, right? And especially if people aren't aware enough, well, then comes a problem, a big problem actually. Now, what is that problem? The problem is that, you know, the ego will always function on the sense of, hey, I suffered, everyone has to suffer. This is what psychiatry calls a bit narcissistic, okay? And as far as the ego is concerned, it's never gonna be enough. And unfortunately, many people get stuck into this. Of course, we can go into a lot of aspects, into a lot of things, okay? And, oh, cool. I should be checking his live stream. So many people get stuck into this, and it becomes like their comfort zone, spiritually speaking. And you know, there are so many people who say there are these parasites that cling to people, and you know, these demons that love drama, right? Drama and traumas, right? And they love using people for this, right? They even implant thoughts in their mind. Well, you have to understand that all these types of traumas have been influencing humanity's ability to judge, right? Because if you give a person enough power, it's not necessarily the best thing, because their traumas can simply judge them, okay? Like, take for example a person, okay? A white person is abused when they are young by, I don't know, some black people in the neighborhood. I'm just giving an example. I'm not pointing at anything because I'm not interested in spreading racism, okay? Now, imagine that that person is just one of the cases, okay? It's the same thing if they were a black person, right? So, these people end up in time as being, you know, part of society. Some may end up as cops, some may end up as judges, some may end up as politicians, right? Because these three structures of society can end up easily having an impact on the functioning of society, okay? So imagine that they are suddenly faced with a case, you know, that is extremely similar to their own case of abuse, right? So let's say a black person has been abused by white people, right? And they also, with black people, it's a bit more problematic, because we shouldn't forget that for hundreds of years there has been a lot of abuse against them, okay? Now, it's not correct to judge the people in the past, okay, for their actions, you know, and propagate that on the people in the present, right? Because that's not the way to go. Sure, that karma exists, and you know, the trauma still exists, because whatever happened back in our history is still in our DNA, okay? We still carry it even individually. So every one of us is still impacted by that one way or another, okay? Especially in America, where most of that actually happened, but I'm sure it also happened in Europe, okay? Now in Eastern Europe, I don't know exactly if that happened, because I don't know if like Eastern Europe hasn't been represented by great empires and such. At least I haven't heard about um, slave trading in my country, for example, in its history. I'm sure slaves have existed everywhere, because society has based itself on slaves for a very long time. But the point about racism, okay, racism is just a big, big, big illusion, okay? Now, racism does not concern the idea of a race, okay? Racism concerns the idea of race in terms of competition, okay? We are also, as humans, we are called the human race, but the question is, where are we racing towards? Because there is no one else to have competition against, right? Considering our capacity, our intellectual capacity, our intelligence, we have created so many things. Basically, we have kind of disconnected ourselves from nature, but at the same time, we have created, unfortunately, our own jungle. It's a concrete jungle, yes, but It's a jungle because we don't know how to control our minds and emotions. And just as I wanted to present through an example, but I guess people who would see this video would be awakened enough to know that, hey, that's just an example, okay? You just have to understand that your parents, probably not yours specifically, but parents and a lot of adults, okay, uh, they have been filled with a lot of negativity and trauma, okay, which their parents in turn gave to them, who in turn were given by their parents, and so on and so forth, right? School also does a horrible job at, teaching people how to survive, and society also does a horrible job at, teaching people how to survive. And we have a lot of humans that simply don't know how to handle their emotions, especially their emotions, and well, that's a big problem because all these people end up in society, and some of them end up in places that can have a greater impact upon others, right? And ignorance again is a big problem because school should be the one who to educate people, and educario in Latin means to bring out of ignorance, okay, because education should bring people out of ignorance. But given the uh, the alarming number of sleepwalking people, right, or ignorance, whatever you want to call them, bots, whatever, okay, I'm not here to judge, and I simply cannot judge, but the point is, call them what you want, the huge number of such people is actually an alarm, right? It actually shows how sick this society actually is, because this ignorance, okay, is represented by a lot of people who simply don't care what happens after them. Like, look at the world as is. So many generations have existed, and nowadays the later generations, right, the previous ones, let's say, have laid waste to this planet, so our children are simply born to a world where they don't have much to see, right? Like, forests are devastated, so many of the animal species are endangered, some will never be seen again, right? And it doesn't comfort anyone, or at least it doesn't comfort me, that there are these scientists and groups that want to replicate DNA of extinct species to try to bring them back. Well, that's an interesting thing. That's an interesting thing to do, but what's original, okay? What evolved naturally is what evolved naturally. If we are trying to replicate that, we are also going to replicate their DNA, which to a certain extent will replicate their memory. But when you replicate something, you're not going to create the same quality of nature, so whatever soul will come into that body will not be fully compatible with that. Okay, it's like a demo version, it's like a trial version of life. Okay, it's not a fault of it's not a fault of our technology, but it's just a point that if you're playing life, okay, that's not a way to go. Because if you're playing life, okay, when you want to replicate life, okay, you're trying to take the creator's purpose, right? If we become capable of replicating any life form on this planet, then what's the purpose of creation, right? Now, it's not that creation will oppose us, okay? I don't think creation is even aware that we exist, okay? Creation is simply unconsciousness, okay? It just simply creates based on intelligence. It doesn't need to know anything, okay? It doesn't need to be conscious to create something. It just flows, okay? In order to flow, you need to have a certain level, okay? Which it's kind of hard for me to define, okay? Cannot read property of undefined, like just like JavaScript. But the point about this is racism, okay, is only targeted as well as anything that I don't like at you, okay, puts me in a place of a race, okay, because I'm racing to show you that I'm superior, right? Now, how racism works is very simple, and it's been something that's been existing forever since. Because again, people don't know how to control their minds, right? How to make use of their mind, because control might sound a bit awkward. Now, people don't know that when they accept a certain idea, there is a part of their mind, a part of the brain, that simply will be even willing to die for a certain aspect. Okay, when you let's say identify yourself, when you accept a certain idea, okay, you're even gonna die for that. So imagine this, okay, this may sound very thick, but it's part of society. So many people nowadays are taught that they are worthless, they are nothing. Unfortunately, when these people embrace that idea, that part within them will guard that idea with almost that person's life, right? And guess what? Suddenly you have some people who are willing to even die for the idea that they suck. Okay, now how sick is this? Well, it's technically it's not sick, it's natural because it's how a part of us actually works. Okay, when someone identifies itself with something, that part of themselves is even willing to die for that. Okay, unfortunately, being like willing to die for something means also being ready or willing to even kill for that, right? Now this has worked very well in the past, okay, when we had tribes and when we had tribal development, right? In terms of history, it has been an important part because there has been tribal development, right? There were tribes that were developing, and they had tattoos and all sorts of ways through which they would identify with something. But that tribe was basically their existence, right? They had their crops in there, they had their family, they had their most important thing, which was their survival. So that was basically their environment. Okay, it was obvious they would die for that, and at the same time they would even kill for that, right? Because willing to kill for something equates willing to die for something. It's basically the same mechanic. Of course, many people might take them as separate, but it's basically the same mechanic. Now, at the same time, this is also a little problematic because with people not knowing how to take hold of their mind, people end up with believing, and throughout history this happened so many times, people would end up believing something. Now the problem is, when they believe that, they believe it's the only true thing. And this is a very horrible thing when it happens in people, who are illiterate. But if it happens with people who are illiterate, at least it's easily manageable because, those people are very simple, they don't know much. When this happens with people who are literate and who also know things, but they get stuck in these subterfuges of the mind, oh, that's gonna be a very tough battle. Now add to this that person also has some big place in society, and then it becomes a game like Simon Says or something like that. There was a game like that. I don't know what it was called. When I was in kindergarten, we actually had a game like that. Okay, and funnily speaking, it's an awesome way of actually programming a child to respond to commands. Okay, so I don't know how you call them. Like in Romanian, we call them educators. Okay, the teachers in a kindergarten, right? So the teacher would assume a certain role. Okay, they were the so-called leader. Okay, and she would embody someone like, let's say, Simon. Okay, and she would be something like Simon says jump on one leg. Okay, and we as children we would jump on one leg. Okay, and I don't know, Simon says clap your hands, right? And we would clap our hands. Apparently when we were young it was actually fun, but well, nowadays when I think of it, well, actually I don't want to think of it because I'll most likely end up tainting it with emotions, and I really don't want to ruin those memories. So yeah, that's a point, right? So once you have such power, okay, just like it happens in society, okay, now you have people who say, well, now we have a virus that's running loose, and guess what? Simon says everyone wear a face mask, and guess what? So many of the people being people pleasers and slaves that would die for this aspect of being a slave, because as I said, it's much easier to fool someone than convince them that they've been fooled. Well, I didn't necessarily say this, but indirectly I said, because I said people will even die for what they identify themselves with. So if people believe that people pleasing is the only, you know, is the way, okay, is the only way, well, they're even willing to die for that. So if you want to change them, that's one of the reasons why they will fight ferociously against that. Now, this is also a little troublesome because it's also troubling because, well, you have people in charge who will say, well, Simon says everyone wear a face mask, and now everyone must wear a face mask. And then Simon might say, hey, you know what? Simon says everyone take a vaccination. And of course, the people pleasers most likely will do that. And well, the big problem with that is that those people are willing to die for their belief, and well, their belief might be that hey, they want society to remain the way that it is, right? They want society to remain the way it is. Society is very sick nowadays. I've made a previous video about this, and it's like, if you need actually proof of that, go watch that video and well, come back to this one and present me your point of view if you're still not convinced. And well, racism is all about competition, okay? I've made, usually in my videos, I go through a lot of things, like I make kind of a circle to make a foundation to present my idea afterwards. So racism is just an idea of because I said so, okay, or because I thought so. And at the same time, it's just a dumb competition, okay? It's just a silly competition, a game that so many people with untrained minds and untrained emotions will end up playing, okay? It's just a game. It's just a game that people are playing because people who end up believing a certain thing, as I said, they will die for those things, and illiterate people or people who haven't trained their mind enough will believe that it's the only possible way, okay? It's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. The less you know, the more you think you actually know. And the opposite is also right. The more you know, the more you know you actually know, you know so little, okay? The less you realize, the more you realize that you know shit, okay? Because there's always so much more to learn. Nowadays, being a genius is, you just need the right phone numbers. You don't need to know it all, okay? It's impossible to know it all because, well, even in a very small, domain, okay, field of study, there's a lot to be learned. There's a lot to be learned. Not to forget that there's always something new appearing, so it's always going to be a challenge because you also have to keep up with things. So you can only take like two or three, let's say, far-fetched, at most four domains of study, okay, and still keep up with them because there's new stuff to appear. Now, when racism is triggered by this sensation that many people have, well, basically because they identified themselves with something, okay, a nationality, skin color, eye color, I don't know, whatever. Nowadays, it's even with parties, right? People identify themselves with football teams, parties, music genres, literally kind of anything. So society is like like it's a ticking bomb, right? It's like, I don't know how this, like this one hates, these ones hate certain music type, the others one hate another music type, this one loves a certain movie type, others love another movie type, and it's all this is just racism, okay? What you're doing in your mind is you're believing that once you have identified yourself with, I don't know, a certain genre of music, when you identify too much with that, okay, it's okay to like it, okay, it's okay to like more things, but when someone identifies too much with a certain thing, there is a big problem because that becomes as if it's the only thing that exists to that person. So it's the best automatically. When you say it's the best, you are automatically entering a race, okay? You're entering a race against the other people, okay, against the other beings, because the other beings, you're seeing them somewhat as lesser, okay? You're seeing them as lesser beings. You're just racing, to prove them that they are inferior to you in whatever way possible, or in whatever one or more reasons you believe they would be, inferior, for whatever things you have in your mind, okay, whatever beliefs you have in your mind. And a belief is nothing else than accepting something without a necessity for proof. That's what a belief is, right? And as I've been saying in other videos, okay, when you believe something, okay, it's like you're creating a pantheon in your mind, okay? Each and every one of your beliefs is basically a thought form that you're constantly feeding. It's like you're worshipping a god, or let's say a deity, okay, because I don't want to give genders, okay? So yeah, that's a point. I mean, and when you worship these deities, okay, these thought forms of your mind, you can only worship them by giving them energy. And to give them energy, you need a conduit, okay? You need a channeler, okay? And those channelers will be those which will remind you again and again to worship those deities, which means to fuel those with energy again and again, right? And this happens through stories. In order to believe something and constantly believe it, okay, so therefore nurture the lie, because the belief doesn't necessarily mean it's true, right? In order to nurture the lie, you're going to create stories. So those stories are technically the preachers who will preach your deities, okay, of your illusionary pantheon, right? So as you are doing this, okay, you're doing more and more harm to yourself, because you're not understanding the potential of your mind, and you're just embracing certain beliefs. And the belief is, again, as I said, accepting something without a necessity for proof. Now, I'm not saying deities and pointing towards any religion, okay? This is just an idea, just a point, that any thought that you're thinking of, okay, any thought form that you're thinking of, and any thought that you're thinking of, okay, the moment you think of something, you're giving some energy towards that. So technically, you're starting to build a little thing. Now, of course, if you abandon it, it's not going to be completed, but it's still a little thing, a little thought form you have created. So technically, the mind is just something that constantly keeps creating. So racism is, well, as I said, it's just a thought form, okay? I've made some video, I've presented the idea of thought forms in other previous videos, indirectly or directly. Now, what I wanted to also discuss is this topic here: racism is never justified. Well, actually, that is a kind of a controversy, I could say, because there is a little problem in here. Okay, racism is always justified. Okay, now let me dive a bit into this, because I don't want to make this video too long. Okay, now racism is always justified because everything is justified. When something happens, there is always a trigger. Okay, there is always a trigger, and there is always a cause. Okay, what we are seeing usually and surrounding us, it's usually causes. All the hatred that there is in society, all the suffering that is in society, okay, all the killing, all the onslaught, okay, these are just effects. Okay, so much murdering, so many wars are happening. Well, those are just results. Okay, the causes are, we have invested so much into weapons of mass destruction. We have invested so much as a race into these weapons because, again, we are in a race. We are in a race with our own demons, because we have all the technology and all the possible luxury in the world, but still our mind is that of poverty. Our mind is that of survival mode. We have created our own jungles where there are no predators. There are no physical predators to kill us in here. Well, of course, there are in many remote areas, and in the suburbs of a lot of cities. And even in America, I heard that in some places you might end up having crocodiles and other animals. But it's the fact that we have overexpanded. Okay, we have expanded in their own regions, right? So this is another kind of race. It's a war against nature, because we want to expand more and more. We take so much more, but we give so little. That's a problem, because this is not healthy expansion. Okay, when we are expanding so much, we are taking from nature so much that we are becoming like a plague. We are becoming like a cancer. So all these animals, we are kind of in a war with them. We are in a race with them. So in a way, we are kind of racist, because we're taking like all the habitats of nature, We are just trying to prove them to a certain extent that we are superior. Of course we are superior. We have done everything possible to ensure our survival, and we have done so many things that no animal can do. But it doesn't mean that we should actually butcher and slaughter these animals, okay? And well, all this karma that we have been doing, okay, this is again the result of poor mental usage, okay? And well, this is another problem, okay? Now racism is always justified because everything happens because of something, okay? Even if you don't choose to act on something, okay, you have chosen not to act, so it is still a choice, it is still an action. So when racism happens, okay, when racism is manifest, okay, this is again part of a huge chain of effects, okay, that we actually see, because the causes have existed long since, okay. When the first people were allowed to manifest this idea of racism, and it has been propagated through the course of nature, because again people back then didn't have trained minds, and they had traumas in childhood. They wanted to use some power, they wanted to feel a bit in control, and all sorts of and sorts of things like this. And as karma became stronger and stronger, to many people it became harder and harder to resist. So well, there can be a lot of interpretation, so let's actually focus on the present. Now racism, when it manifests, okay, it is always justified. First of all, it is justified in a way because it exists there. It is in our genes, it is in our evolutionary karma, it is in our evolutionary memory, okay. So many people have been oppressed, okay, because that's an animalistic thing, okay. It's an aspect that happens in nature. Any big animal will always pick on a smaller animal just because it is defenseless. It's the same thing, right? Parents beat their children not because the children are bad. Probably the parents might be dumb enough to believe that their children are bad, but the child is 100% you. Your DNA has been flushed into that child, okay? And also the DNA of your spouse, okay? So definitely what the child is manifesting is a lot of your traumas in the past, because the purpose of a child is to remind you what you have in you that how to call it, oh yes, that you haven't yet purged, okay. And sure, the child also is a life in its own, but parents, ever since a child is born, many of the parents again are racist. They are in this race that they want to teach the child all the rubbish they have in their minds, and they want to dump all their negativity and all their hatred and all whatever in the child, okay. Now this can be done consciously and unconsciously, right? And people who live in their traumas and in the past are usually unconscious, so well, they're just propagating what they have learned and not having sufficient awareness. They're just propagating that, okay. So there is racism literally everywhere, but racism is always justified. It's just that the justification is only there in the mind of that individual, or those individuals who support their own ideas, okay. Now all these things and ideas, okay, with Black Lives Matter, what I see this is kind of a big illusion, okay. I'm gonna be fair and square in here. Black Lives Matter is kind of an illusion, okay. And I'm saying this because you have to be a little dummy not to realize that Black Lives Matter is an illusion. When something is propagated and supported in society, it is only supported because some people benefit from that, okay. It's the same thing in the music industry and everywhere, but usually you see that in the music industry because people have learned how to manipulate the masses, okay, and how to make profits out of the masses, because so many people want to be famous instantly. And I made one video on how to become instantly famous on YouTube, but well, it only implies that you sell your life. When you create these contracts, okay, that give you fame, you're basically gonna have a lot of friend bots attached to your YouTube account, and that's one of the reasons why those people who make commercial music have millions of subscribers. But most of those subscribers aren't even they aren't necessarily human at all, okay. If you don't believe me, just just make a look. Just take a look, okay? I've been bombarded by friend bots and all sorts of quotes and the such. I've deleted most of them, but you know I would find friend bots that would have 250,000 subscribers, but they didn't have any video. The accounts were quite old, and they didn't have any video. Supposing you pay enough, well, guess what? You've paid enough. Now you have a sufficient amount of subscribers. When you become famous, okay, the point is, when you become famous, um, well, you have to kind of pay, but uh, depending on how much you pay, you're gonna get a sufficient amount of views, because all the numbers in this world can be faked. Okay, numbers may not lie, but numbers can be faked. Okay, they can be faked so that they don't lie. Okay, but that is still a lie because you're faking the numbers, right? Because if you see 3000, well, 3000 will always mean 3000, but you don't know if that 3000 is really true. Just like with the cunt virus, right? You never know if those cases of coronavirus deaths aren't like inflated as fuck or not. Okay, like I've actually watched a few professionals speak, and well, I kind of looked at things with other eyes. Okay, like okay, that's kind of awkward. Okay, so Black Lives Matter is gonna be supported because there's a lot of pain in black people, and guess what? There is a lot of profit out of pain. Just like there will not be any vaccine for the coronavirus because the disease itself is always gonna be more profitable. Remember that there are always those types of people who want to make a profit out of the most vulnerable people. People who want, for example, to give up fat. There's always some so-called magnificent instant program or something or product that will make them lose fat, right? People who are young and they are in debt, they will always be targeted by get rich quick different schemes. Okay, so when you become a singer and as such, you're always gonna be put to make some first, let's say, 2 or 3 successful albums. Then you will have to make a few failures, right? Because even in failures you're profitable, right? You can't be perfect all the time. Okay, there's always these things how to influence the masses, and well, there are people who are very perfect at this. Okay, they've been perfecting this throughout dozens of years, right? And well, black people, we know that they have a lot more pain, right? There is a lot more karma or memory, right? Because karma equals memory, and there is a lot of memory of pain in them, right? So that memory is very juicy for people, because those people, some people, right? Because those people will always take profit from your pains, right? It's kind of also the same with the pharmaceuticals nowadays. If you're healthy, you're kind of a parasite in this society because you're not using any pharmaceuticals. But oh, if you fall ill, there is so much medication you can take. Okay, and it's like the whole industry can't stop providing you with what you theoretically would need, right? So why I'm saying Black Lives Matter is a hoax in a way, it might actually help some, but I really doubt there is any black person who's, you know, favored, okay? Because I'm not gonna say society doesn't care about black people. Society simply doesn't care about you, irrespective of what your skin color is, because society is represented only by the bunch of people that form it, okay? And considering the thousands of generations of ignorance, okay, which is the result of abuse, okay, lack of love, lack of empathy from a lot of parents, okay, throughout these thousands of generations, this karma, okay, has become so great that people nowadays don't even seem to be caring enough to simply try to make an effort to purge some of this karma, so that the next generations that are born with much less karma. Why do you think the indigo children, the crystal children and the such have suddenly appeared, right? there needs to be a tampon, okay, what I call it the generational tampon, right? It has to be a stop, a wall that says, okay, enough of this. All this karma of the past needs to go, okay, so that the planet simply keeps evolving, and everything that cannot keep up with will most likely one way or another go cuckoo, okay? So I'm not saying that black lives don't matter. Every life should matter. Because when you say black lives matter, this again is racism, okay? Because when you say black lives matter, you're saying, hey, but what about the others? Yeah, sure, white people, have done a lot of things, and society might still aim at, white people in a certain way. All these things will be taken care of in time naturally if you allow them to. Okay, karma simply dissipates. But if we keep thinking about it, we're gonna simply create more and more karma, more and more memory and misfortune. So that is why things will take so hard and so long to actually solve, right? So all life should matter. That's basically what we should say, because when we say all life matters, we're also gonna look better at animals, and we'll no longer see them as our future meals, okay? Because those animals weren't necessarily born for us to eat, okay? So racism is always justified. However, it's most likely always gonna be in the minds of the people who support it, okay? Because I've been discussing about this throughout the whole video, okay? Now the last thing that I wanted to present is racism is the original American pandemic, okay? Now I want you to understand this little point, okay? Racism is not the original American pandemic, okay? Yes, racism is a pandemic, but it's been here far before America, okay? It may be a big social problem in America, but it's kind of a problem everywhere in the world. It's called an American pandemic because we know society kind of is, has a lot of friction in between white-skinned people and black-skinned people, right? There is a lot of tension in, the suburbs, in the cities, in the towns, probably. Not everywhere, okay? Not everywhere. But there will always be those people who call themselves supremacists, okay? And being a supremacist means that you've identified so much with just one simple aspect of your life, which is probably less than 1% of who and what you are. Sure, it's up to each and everyone to experience what they want, but racism is not an American pandemic, okay? It doesn't have anything to do with America. It just found a better nest in there, but that happened because America basically is nothing else than, a conglomerate of the European countries, okay? Having that much diversity, it's obvious that you will give birth to a lot of racism. It's obvious. Wherever there is diversity, racism will also follow, because there will always be people who have power, and there will always be people who will cede their power, okay? And whoever has the power usually will do whatever they want. Add to them the traumas of the past, and well, you get the society of nowadays, right? So hopefully you like the type of videos that I'm creating and the introspection that I'm providing. Feel free to ask me questions, and I will sooner or later create videos on that. You are loved and appreciated. Take care of yourself. You are more than good enough. Ferenc Bohr signing out.